The stagecoach rattled into Sioux Falls, South Dakota on a blistering August afternoon in 1876, carrying Beatrice Abbott and the weight of secrets that could destroy her before she ever stepped foot in her new life. Dust coated everything, from the wooden buildings lining the main street to the faces of curious townsfolk who stopped to watch the coach pull up outside the general store. Beatrice pressed her gloved hand against the window, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it over the clatter of hooves and wheels. 23 years old, and she was running toward something she prayed might save her, even as she fled from everything that had nearly killed her. The door opened, and a weathered hand reached up to help her down. She took it, stepping into the hot Dakota sun, and found herself face to face with a man who looked nothing like his letters had suggested. Lucas Abbott stood a full head taller than her, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard work and sun-darkened skin that creased around his eyes when he smiled. Those eyes were green, startling against his tanned face, and held a kindness that made her throat tight. "Miss Beatrice." His voice was rough but gentle, like wind through prairie grass. "Mr. Abbott." Her own voice came out smaller than she intended. He held her hand a moment longer than necessary, studying her with an intensity that made her want to both look away and step closer. She had expected someone older from his letters, someone worn down by frontier life. But Lucas looked to be perhaps 27 or 28, with a vitality that contradicted the loneliness she had read between the lines of his correspondence. "Welcome to Sioux Falls," he said, finally releasing her hand to retrieve her single trunk from the back of the coach. "I hope the journey was not too difficult." It was long. She smoothed her travel-stained dress, suddenly conscious of how she must look after 3 weeks on trains and stage coaches. Her dark hair had mostly escaped its pins, and she knew her face was flushed from heat and anxiety. Lucas seemed not to notice or care about her dishevelment. He hoisted her trunk onto his shoulder with an ease that spoke of considerable strength and gestured down the street. "My ranch is about 5 miles out. We can stop at the hotel if you would like to rest first, or get something to eat." The thought of delaying the inevitable made her stomach clench. "I would prefer to see my new home if that is acceptable." Something flickered across his face, pleasure perhaps, or relief. "Of course. My wagon is just there." The wagon was sturdy and well-maintained, pulled by 2 strong horses that nickered softly as Lucas approached. He set her trunk in the back with care, then helped her onto the seat with that same gentle touch. When he settled beside her and took up the reins, Beatrice was acutely aware of his proximity, the heat radiating from his body in the afternoon sun, the solid strength of him. They rode in silence for the first mile, leaving the small town behind for open prairie that stretched endlessly in all directions. The grass rippled like water in the breeze, and the sky overhead was so vast and blue it made her dizzy to look at it. She had come from Boston, where buildings pressed close together and the horizon was always interrupted by rooftops and church spires. This openness felt like freedom and exposure all at once. "I should tell you," Lucas said finally, breaking the silence, "that I am not much for fancy words or proper manners. My letters probably made me sound more refined than I am." Beatrice turned to look at him, surprised by the admission. "Your letters were honest." "That was what I appreciated most about them." He glanced at her, those green eyes searching her face. "You wrote honest letters too, at least they felt honest, but I imagine there are things you could not say in writing." Her heart stuttered. Did he know? Could he somehow sense the darkness she carried? "I imagine the same is true for you." "Fair enough." He returned his attention to the horses, but a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "We will have time to learn each other properly." The ranch appeared on the horizon gradually, first as a dark smudge against the prairie, then resolving into a house, barn, and several outbuildings surrounded by fencing. It was modest but well kept, and as they drew closer, Beatrice could see evidence of care in every detail. The house had been recently painted white, and someone had planted flowers along the front, though they struggled in the harsh Dakota climate. "My sister Margaret helped with those," Lucas said, noticing her gaze. "She lives in town now, married to the blacksmith, but she insisted I needed something pretty growing here. Said no woman wants to come to a place without flowers. They are lovely." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes unexpectedly. The thought that this man and his sister had tried to make things welcoming for her, a stranger, touched something deep inside her chest. Lucas pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and jumped down, then came around to help her. This time when he lifted her down, his hands lingered at her waist, and she found herself standing very close to him, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his green eyes and smell the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him. "I know this is not what you are accustomed to," he said quietly, "but I will do my best to make you happy here." The sincerity in his voice nearly undid her. She had not expected kindness, had braced herself for indifference at best. "Thank you," she whispered. He showed her through the house, which consisted of a main room with a kitchen area and fireplace, 2 bedrooms, and a small washroom that Lucas explained he had added just last year. Everything was clean and orderly, masculine but not uncomfortable. The furniture was handmade but sturdy, and here and there she saw small touches that spoke of preparation for her arrival. New curtains in what was clearly meant to be her bedroom, a vase on the kitchen table, fresh linens folded on the bed. "I thought you might want your own space," Lucas said, standing in the doorway of the bedroom. "Until you are comfortable, we can wait for the wedding." Beatrice turned from examining the window to look at him. "The Reverend in town, he can perform the ceremony, Reverend Walsh." "Yes, whenever you are ready." Lucas leaned against the doorframe, his large frame filling the space. "There is no rush, I want you to be certain. I came all this way to marry you, Mr. Abbott. I am certain of that decision." "Lucas," he said. "Please call me Lucas." "Lucas." The name felt strange on her tongue, intimate. "And you must call me Beatrice. Beatrice." The way he said it, with that rough, gentle voice, made her name sound like something precious. They stood looking at each other for a long moment, and Beatrice felt the weight of all her secrets pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. He deserved to know. Before they married, before she let him tie his life to hers, he deserved to know the truth about who she was and what she had done. But the words stuck in her throat, trapped by fear and shame. "You must be tired," Lucas said finally. "I will let you rest. There is water in the pitcher, and I will call you for supper." After he left, closing the door softly behind him, Beatrice sank onto the bed and pressed her hands to her face. The room smelled of fresh wood and sunshine, clean and hopeful, and she felt like a stain about to spread across it all. She had killed a man. That was the truth she carried, the secret that had driven her across half a continent to this remote corner of South Dakota. She had taken a life, and no matter the circumstances, no matter that he had been killing her slowly for 2 years, it did not change the fact that his blood was on her hands, her husband. Former husband. Charles Winters had been a respected man in Boston, a banker with money and standing, and when he had courted her, she had been flattered by his attention. Her parents had been dead for 3 years, leaving her orphaned at 19 with nothing but debts, and Charles had seemed like salvation. She had married him quickly, gratefully, never seeing the monster that lurked beneath his charming exterior. The first time he hit her had been a month after their wedding. She had burned the roast, a simple mistake, and he had backhanded her across the face hard enough to split her lip. Then he had apologized, brought her flowers, sworn it would never happen again. But it had happened again. And again. For 2 years, Charles had beaten her, controlled her, isolated her from anyone who might help. He had broken 3 of her ribs once, her nose twice, sprained her wrist, blackened her eyes more times than she could count. She had learned to hide it, to time her shopping trips for when the bruises had faded, to wear long sleeves and high collars, to lie convincingly about her clumsiness. The servants knew, she was certain, but in 1874 a man's treatment of his wife was his own business. No one interfered, no one helped, until the night she had stopped him. Until the night his hands had closed around her throat and she had known with absolute certainty that he intended to kill her. Her groping fingers had found the fireplace poker, and she had swung it with all her remaining strength, driven by pure animal desperation to survive. The crack of his skull had been sickeningly loud in the quiet parlor. He had dropped like a stone, his hands finally releasing her throat, and she had stood there gasping and shaking, watching blood pool beneath his head. She should have called for help then. Should have screamed for the servants, claimed it was an accident or self-defense. But panic had taken over, and all she could think was that no one would believe her. Charles was respected, beloved even. She was just his wife, and everyone knew wives were hysterical creatures prone to exaggeration. They would hang her for murder, so she had run. Taken what money she could find in his desk, grabbed a few belongings, and fled into the night. By the time his body was discovered the next morning, she was already on a train heading west, her hair cut short and hidden under a bonnet, wearing her plainest dress. She had become someone else, taken her mother's maiden name of Abbott, and when she had seen Lucas's advertisement in a newspaper seeking a mail-order bride, she had written to him with trembling hands. Now she was here in his home, about to marry him under false pretenses. The guilt was crushing. A knock on the door made her jump. "Beatrice, supper is ready if you are hungry." She wiped her eyes quickly, smoothed her dress, and opened the door to find Lucas standing there with concern evident on his face. He was too perceptive, this cowboy. She would have to be more careful. "I am fine," she said, summoning a smile. "Just tired from the journey, as you said." He did not look convinced, but did not press. Instead, he led her to the kitchen table where he had laid out a simple meal: fresh bread, butter, sliced ham, and canned peaches. It was humble fare, but it had been prepared with care, and Beatrice found herself genuinely hungry for the first time in weeks. They ate in companionable silence for a while, and Beatrice studied Lucas when she thought he was not looking. He had large, capable hands, scarred and calloused from work, but the way he handled his knife and fork was gentle, precise. She wondered what those hands would feel like on her skin, and immediately felt her face heat at the thought. "Tell me about your family," Lucas said, breaking into her inappropriate thoughts. "Your letters mentioned you were an orphan, but not much else." Beatrice set down her fork carefully. This at least was truth she could tell. "My parents died of fever when I was 19. My father was a clerk, and we were not wealthy but comfortable. After they passed, I discovered he had debts I had not known about. I had to sell everything just to settle them. That must have been difficult, being so young and alone." "It was." She met his eyes. "I made some poor choices after that, trusted the wrong people." Something shifted in Lucas's expression, a knowing that suggested he understood more than she was saying. "We all make mistakes when we are desperate or grieving. Some mistakes have bigger consequences than others." "True enough." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The touch sent warmth flooding through her. "But that is the past. This is a new start, Beatrice, for both of us. What are you running from?" The question left her mouth before she could stop it. Lucas did not seem offended. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, still holding her hand, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm that made it hard to concentrate. "I am not running from anything, but I am building toward something. I came out here 5 years ago with nothing but a horse and a dream of having my own land. I have worked hard, saved every penny, and now I have this ranch. It is not much yet, but it is mine. The only thing missing was someone to share it with. You could have courted someone in town. You did not need to send away for a bride. The women in town are few and mostly spoken for. And those that are not have known me since I arrived covered in trail dust without 2 coins to rub together. They remember me as the drifter who worked odd jobs to survive." He smiled, but there was an old hurt behind it. "It is hard to court a woman when she remembers you sleeping in the livery stable because you could not afford a room. That does not sound like something to be ashamed of. It sounds like you were determined to survive and build a life. You are kind to say so." His hand tightened on hers. "But pride is a strange thing. I wanted to start fresh with someone who did not know me when I had nothing. Someone who might see me for who I am now, not who I was." Beatrice understood that desire more than he could know, to be seen as you were now, not as the broken thing you had been. If only she could believe she deserved such grace. They finished supper and washed the dishes together, moving around the kitchen in a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Lucas told her about the ranch, the 30 head of cattle he ran, the 3 horses besides the 2 that pulled the wagon, his plans to expand gradually. He spoke with quiet pride about what he had built, and Beatrice found herself drawn to his steadiness, his simple competence. As the sun began to set, painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber, Lucas walked her back to her room. He paused at the door, and for a moment Beatrice thought he might kiss her. Her heart raced at the prospect, equal parts anticipation and fear. But Lucas only raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Sleep well, Beatrice. Tomorrow we can go into town if you like and speak to Reverend Walsh about the wedding, or we can wait longer if you prefer." "Tomorrow is fine," she heard herself say. "I see no reason to wait." His smile was brilliant, transforming his serious face into something boyish and joyful. "Tomorrow, then. Good night." "Good night, Lucas." She closed the door and leaned against it, her hand still tingling where his lips had touched. She was going to marry this man tomorrow, bind her life to his, and he had no idea who she really was. The guilt threatened to suffocate her, but beneath it ran a thread of desperate hope. Maybe here, in this wild place so far from Boston, she could truly become someone new. Maybe the woman who had killed her husband could fade away, replaced by the woman who married Lucas Abbott. But secrets had a way of surfacing, and Beatrice knew that eventually she would have to face the truth. She only hoped that when that day came, Lucas would understand. Or at least that he would forgive her before he sent her away. Sleep came fitfully that night, interrupted by dreams of blood and Charles's hands around her throat. She woke gasping in the darkness, disoriented, and it took several moments to remember where she was. Not in Boston. Not in the house where she had killed a man. She was in South Dakota in Lucas's ranch house, safe. The word felt foreign. Safe. She had not felt safe in so long. Morning light crept through the curtains, and Beatrice rose to wash and dress in her best remaining outfit, a simple blue dress that had somehow survived the journey without too many wrinkles. She pinned her dark hair up carefully, studying her reflection in the small mirror. She looked pale and anxious, her blue eyes too large in her thin face. Charles had not liked her eating much, said women should maintain their figures, and the 2 years with him had left her more slender than was healthy. When she emerged from her room, she found Lucas already up, coffee made and breakfast waiting. He had shaved and put on what were clearly his best clothes, dark trousers, a white shirt, and a vest. He looked handsome and nervous, and the sight of him made her chest ache. "I was not sure if you were an early riser," he said, pulling out a chair for her, "but I hoped you might be hungry." "Thank you." She sat, accepting the coffee he poured. It was strong and hot, exactly what she needed. "You did not have to go to such trouble. It is our wedding day. Or it will be if you are still certain." She met his eyes over her coffee cup. "I am certain. Are you?" "I have never been more certain of anything." The conviction in his voice was absolute. They ate quickly, both too nervous for much appetite. Then Lucas hitched up the wagon again, and they made the journey back into Sioux Falls. The town was busier in the morning, with people going about their business, and Beatrice was conscious of the curious stares they received. News of the mail-order bride had clearly spread. Reverend Walsh lived in a small house beside the church, and he answered Lucas's knock with a wide smile. He was an older man, perhaps 60, with white hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Lucas, and this must be Miss Beatrice." "Welcome, my dear, welcome." He ushered them inside. "Margaret told me you had arrived yesterday. She wanted to come meet you herself, but the baby has been fussy." Margaret had her baby. Lucas's face lit up. "Boy or girl?" "A boy, strong and healthy, born 3 days ago. They have named him Thomas after her late father." Reverend Walsh beamed. "But you are here for your own happy occasion, I imagine." "We would like to be married today if you are willing," Lucas said. Of course, of course. Have you witnesses?" "We will need 2. This clearly had not occurred to Lucas, and he looked momentarily dismayed. But Reverend Walsh waved away the concern. "No matter. My wife can stand as one, and we can fetch Samuel from the general store. He is always happy to help." And so it was arranged with a speed that made Beatrice's head spin. Within an hour, she found herself standing in the small church beside Lucas, with Mrs. Walsh and Samuel, a cheerful middle-aged shopkeeper, watching as witnesses. Reverend Walsh opened his worn Bible and began to read. The words washed over her, familiar and strange all at once. She had been married before, but that ceremony had been elaborate, performed in a grand Boston church with hundreds of guests. This was simple, intimate, and somehow more real. When Lucas took her hand, his palm warm and rough against hers, she felt tears prick her eyes. "Do you, Lucas Abbott, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do." Lucas's voice was steady, his eyes never leaving her face. "And do you, Beatrice Abbott, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" The irony of her using his surname already, before they had even married, struck her. She had taken it in her letters to hide her real identity, and now here she was, making it legal. "I do." Her voice came out barely above a whisper, but it was enough. Reverend Walsh smiled and closed his Bible. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Lucas, you may kiss your bride." Lucas cupped her face gently in his large hands and bent to kiss her. It was soft and sweet and over too quickly, but it sent warmth spreading through her entire body. When he pulled back, he was smiling, and she found herself smiling in return despite the guilt churning in her stomach. They signed the marriage certificate, with Samuel and Mrs. Walsh adding their signatures as witnesses, and then it was done. She was married again. Beatrice Abbott, wife of Lucas Abbott, rancher. A new identity, a new life. If only she could leave the old one behind so easily. Samuel insisted on breaking out a bottle of wine he kept in the store for special occasions, and they toasted the happy couple. Mrs. Walsh hugged Beatrice warmly and invited them for Sunday dinner once they were settled. Everyone was kind, welcoming, and Beatrice felt the weight of her deception growing heavier with each well wish and congratulation. On the ride back to the ranch, Lucas kept glancing at her, and finally he reached over and took her hand. "You are quiet. Are you having regrets already?" "No." The word came out too quickly, too emphatic. She forced herself to breathe. "No, I am just overwhelmed, I think. Everything has happened so fast." "We can take things slow," Lucas said quietly. "I meant what I said before. There is no rush. We have the rest of our lives." The kindness in his voice made her want to cry. He deserved so much better than a woman with blood on her hands and lies on her lips. But she was selfish enough to hold on, to take what happiness she could find for as long as it lasted. The ranch looked welcoming in the afternoon sun, and as Lucas helped her down from the wagon, Beatrice felt a strange sense of coming home. He kept his hands at her waist a moment, looking down at her, and this time when he kissed her it was deeper, more certain. She melted into it, letting herself forget everything except the warmth of his mouth on hers and the solid strength of his body. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I know we are still strangers in many ways, but I want you to know that I will do everything in my power to make you happy here, Beatrice. That is my promise to you." "I will try to be a good wife to you," she whispered. I have no doubt of that. If only he knew how much she doubted herself. The afternoon passed in a pleasant blur. Lucas showed her around the property more thoroughly, introducing her to the horses and explaining how he managed the ranch. He clearly loved the work despite its challenges, and Beatrice found herself charmed by his enthusiasm. He pointed out where he planned to expand the house eventually, build a proper barn, maybe add some chickens for eggs. "It is a good life," he said, surveying his land with satisfaction. "Hard, but good. And now it will be even better with you here." They ate supper together again, and this time the conversation flowed more easily. Lucas asked about her life in Boston, and Beatrice carefully edited her stories, talking about her parents and her childhood before everything had gone wrong. She had been happy once, before Charles. She had almost forgotten that girl who loved to read and take long walks and believed in happy endings. As darkness fell, the question of sleeping arrangements hung between them. They were married now, but Lucas had promised not to rush her. When he walked her to her bedroom door, he hesitated. "I will be in the other room if you need anything," he said. Beatrice surprised herself by catching his hand. "Lucas, we are married. You do not have to sleep separately if you do not wish to." His eyes searched her face. "I do not want you to feel obligated. I do not." That was not entirely true. She felt obligated by guilt, by the knowledge that she owed him honestly and was giving him lies instead. But she also felt drawn to him, genuinely attracted to this kind, steady man who had welcomed her so completely. "I would like you to stay." The night that followed was gentle and awkward and surprisingly tender. Lucas treated her as though she might break, and Beatrice found herself both grateful for his care and frustrated by it. She was not fragile, though she supposed she seemed that way. She had survived Charles, had killed him and escaped, had traveled across half a continent alone. She was stronger than she looked, but she let Lucas be gentle because he needed to be, because it was clearly important to him to treat her well. And there was something healing in his touch, in the way his hands moved over her skin with reverence rather than violence. Charles had hurt her in bed as much as out of it, had used her body as another way to control and demean her. This was different. This was Lucas seeing her, wanting her, cherishing her. When it was over and they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Lucas pressed a kiss to her temple. "Are you all right?" "Yes." And surprisingly, it was true. She felt all right for the first time in years. Good. He pulled her closer, and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Sleep now, wife. Wife. The word should have terrified her, but instead it felt like shelter. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Lucas rose early to tend the animals and see to ranch work, and Beatrice found ways to make herself useful. She cooked and cleaned, mended his clothes, tended the struggling flower garden. It was simple work, but she found satisfaction in it, in the way Lucas's face would light up when he came in to find supper ready or his torn shirt repaired. They learned each other slowly. She discovered that Lucas liked his coffee black and his bacon crispy, that he hummed tunelessly while he worked, that he read the few books he owned over and over because new ones were hard to come by so far from civilization. He learned that she could not carry a tune at all but loved to sing anyway, that she was surprisingly good with the horses, that thunderstorms made her anxious. He did not yet know that the sound of a man's angry voice made her freeze, that she sometimes woke in the night sure she could feel hands around her throat, that she looked over her shoulder constantly, expecting to see Charles or someone who knew what she had done. 2 weeks after their marriage, Margaret came to visit. She arrived in the blacksmith's wagon, driven by her husband Thomas, with the baby bundled in her arms. She was a pretty woman in her mid-20s with Lucas's green eyes and a warm smile. "So you are the brave soul who agreed to marry my brother," Margaret said, embracing Beatrice like they were old friends. "I would say I am sorry for you, but honestly, you got a good one, even if he does not know how to properly court a woman." "I courted her," Lucas protested, but he was grinning. "You sent her letters and then married her within a day of her arrival. That is not courting." Margaret turned back to Beatrice. "I hope he has been treating you well." "He has been wonderful," Beatrice said honestly. Margaret's expression softened. "Good. Lucas deserves some happiness. He has worked so hard for all this." She gestured around the ranch. "When he first came here, he had nothing. I worried about him constantly. But he was determined to make something of himself, and he has." Over tea and cake that Beatrice had baked that morning, Margaret regaled them with stories of Lucas's early days in South Dakota, and Beatrice learned more about the man she had married. How he had worked 3 jobs simultaneously to save enough to buy his first few acres. How he had built this house himself, log by log. How he had gone without new clothes or decent food to put every penny toward his dream. "He never complained," Margaret said, bouncing the baby gently. "Not once. Even when I knew he was exhausted and half-starved, he just kept working." Lucas looked embarrassed by the praise, but Beatrice reached over and took his hand under the table, squeezing it. He squeezed back, and the simple gesture felt like a promise. When Margaret and Thomas left, promising to visit again soon, Lucas pulled Beatrice into his arms on the porch. "I hope my sister did not overwhelm you. She can be a lot. I liked her very much, and I liked learning more about you. There is not much to know. I am a simple man, Beatrice. I think you are far from simple." She looked up at him. "You are good and kind and strong. Those are not simple things." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and when they made their way to the bedroom that night, there was a new urgency between them, a growing comfort and desire. But Beatrice's past was not content to stay buried. A month after her arrival, she was in town purchasing supplies when she overheard 2 women talking near the dry goods section. "Did you hear about that murder back east? Some banker's wife killed him and ran off. They still have not found her." Beatrice's blood turned to ice. "How shocking," the other woman said. "What kind of woman murders her own husband? A wicked one. They say he was well respected too, a pillar of the community. Can you imagine?" Beatrice forced herself to keep examining the fabric she was holding, though her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip it. They were talking about her, about Charles. The news had traveled this far. I heard she might have come west. The authorities are watching the territories. I hope they catch her and hang her. Women like that deserve no mercy. Beatrice set down the fabric and walked out of the store on trembling legs, forgetting the supplies she had meant to buy. She made it to the wagon before her knees gave out, and she stood there gripping the side, trying to breathe through the panic. They were looking for her. Eventually, someone might connect Beatrice Abbott of Sioux Falls to Beatrice Winters of Boston. She had changed her surname, changed her appearance, but if someone looked closely enough, if they compared descriptions. Beatrice. She spun to find Lucas walking toward her, concern etched on his face. He had been at the feed store. She had not expected to see him yet. Are you ill? You look like you have seen a ghost. I just need to go home. Her voice sounded strange, high and thin. Lucas did not argue, just helped her into the wagon and drove them back to the ranch with quick efficiency. Once inside, he sat her down and crouched in front of her, taking her cold hands in his warm ones. What happened? Nothing, I am fine. Beatrice, you are shaking. Something happened. The concern in his voice, the genuine care, broke something inside her. She could not keep lying to him. She could not keep this terrible secret eating away at her while he treated her with such tenderness. He deserved the truth, even if it destroyed everything. Lucas. Her voice cracked. There is something I have to tell you, something about who I really am and what I did. He settled onto the floor, still holding her hands. All right, I am listening. The words stuck in her throat, too terrible to speak, but she forced them out, halting and painful. My name is Beatrice, that part is true, but my full name was Beatrice Winters before I took your name in my letters. I was married before in Boston, to a man named Charles. Lucas's expression did not change, though she felt his hands tighten slightly on hers. What happened to him? I killed him. The words came out barely above a whisper. I killed my husband and ran away, and now they are looking for me. The silence that followed felt endless. Beatrice could not bring herself to look at Lucas's face, could not bear to see the horror and disgust she knew must be there. She waited for him to release her hands, to stand up and order her out of his house, maybe even to ride back to town and tell the sheriff. Instead, he said quietly, "Tell me everything." So she did. The words poured out of her in a flood, 2 years of pain and fear and degradation. She told him about Charles's charm during their courtship, how he had seemed like salvation. About the first time he hit her and all the times after. About the broken bones and bruises, the isolation, the constant terror. About that final night when his hands had closed around her throat, and she had known with absolute certainty that he intended to kill her. I hit him with the fireplace poker, she said, tears streaming down her face now. I hit him as hard as I could because I wanted to live. And he fell, and there was so much blood, Lucas, so much blood. I should have called for help, but I panicked and I ran, and now they think I am a murderer. You are not a murderer. Lucas's voice was fierce. You defended yourself. The law will not see it that way. His family will not see it that way. He was respected, important. I was just his wife. You are not just anything. Lucas released one of her hands to cup her face, forcing her to look at him. His eyes were blazing, but not with anger at her. You survived. You did what you had to do to stay alive. That does not make you a murderer. You do not understand. I killed a man who was killing you. He wiped her tears with his thumbs, so gentle despite the intensity in his voice. Beatrice, listen to me. I have killed men in the war before I came here. I have killed more men than I care to remember, and some of them haunt me still. But what you did was not murder. It was survival. She stared at him, hardly able to believe what she was hearing. You are not angry. You do not hate me. Angry. I am furious, but not at you. I am angry at the man who hurt you. I am angry that you went through that alone. I am angry that you have been carrying this fear by yourself. He pulled her forward into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. But hate you? How could I hate you for being strong enough to survive? Beatrice broke then, sobbing into his chest, all the fear and guilt and shame pouring out of her in great wrenching waves. Lucas held her through all of it, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring words of comfort. When she finally quieted, exhausted and empty, he picked her up and carried her to their bed, laying down beside her and gathering her close. "They are looking for me," she whispered into the growing darkness. "I heard women in town talking about it. Eventually, someone might connect who I am. Then we will deal with it when that happens. Together. Lucas, you could be in trouble just for harboring me." "I do not care." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You are my wife. I protect what is mine. You should send me away. I have put you in danger by coming here." "I will never send you away." His arms tightened around her. "Do you hear me, Beatrice? Never. I do not care what the law says or what anyone thinks. You belong here with me." She should have argued more, should have tried to make him see reason, but she was so tired and his arms felt so safe. For the first time since killing Charles, she felt like maybe she could breathe again. "I was so afraid to tell you," she admitted quietly. "I thought you would hate me. I could never hate you. If anything, knowing what you survived makes me love you more." The word hung between them in the darkness. Love. He had not said it before, had not rushed her into declarations. But now it was there, simple and true. "You love me." Her voice came out small and wondering. "Yes." No hesitation, no uncertainty. "I think I started loving you the moment you stepped off that stagecoach, looking so scared and trying so hard to be brave. And every day since then has just made it deeper. I do not deserve you. That is not for you to decide. I choose you, Beatrice. All of you, including the parts you think are broken or damaged. I choose you." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but these were different. These were the tears of someone who had been drowning and suddenly found solid ground beneath her feet. "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not think I could ever love anyone again after Charles, but you made me feel safe enough to try." They held each other in the darkness, and for the first time in so long, Beatrice felt something like peace settling over her. The threat was still there, hanging over her head like a sword, but it felt less overwhelming knowing Lucas stood beside her. The next morning, Lucas insisted on riding into town alone. "I need to see what people are saying, what information is spreading. It is better if you stay here where you are safe." Beatrice did not like it, but she understood his reasoning. She spent the day in a state of anxious waiting, jumping at every sound, expecting at any moment to see the sheriff riding up with a warrant for her arrest. But when Lucas returned as the sun was setting, he looked more thoughtful than worried. "The story is spreading, but the details are vague. They are looking for a woman who might have fled west, but there is no description, no name. It seems his family kept it quiet for a while, hoping to find you before it became public scandal." "That sounds like Charles's father," Beatrice said bitterly. "Image was everything to that family. That works in our favor. The longer they tried to keep it quiet, the more the trail has gone cold." Lucas pulled her close. "And you look different now than you did then, I imagine." "Yes. Charles liked me to wear my hair long and dress formally. I cut it before I ran and have been dressing plainly since. And you changed your name, or at least part of it." "I used my mother's maiden name." "Abbott, which is now legally your name through marriage." Lucas smiled grimly. "You are Beatrice Abbott, my wife, born and raised in Boston, orphaned, came here to marry me. That is the truth, and it is all anyone needs to know." But what if someone recognizes me? Who? You said yourself that Charles isolated you. How many people in Boston really knew you well enough to recognize you now, months later and half a continent away? He cupped her face. I am not saying there is no risk. But I think if you were going to be connected to this, it would have happened already. The trail is cold, Beatrice. You made it far enough away that you are safe now. She wanted to believe him, desperately wanted to believe that she could truly be free of her past. What if you are wrong? Then we will figure it out, but I am not going to let you live in fear anymore. His eyes were fierce. You have spent too much of your life afraid. I want you to have peace now, to build a life here without constantly looking over your shoulder. Over the following weeks, Lucas was true to his word. He made it his mission to help Beatrice feel secure, to convince her that she was safe. They fell into new routines, building their life together with intentionality. He taught her to ride properly, and they would take long rides across the prairie where the world felt vast and endless. He showed her how to shoot, insisting she should know how to protect herself if needed. She taught him to cook things beyond the basic fare he had survived on before, and they spent evenings reading together by lamplight, taking turns with the words. Margaret became a regular visitor, and through her, Beatrice was slowly drawn into the community. She met other women in town, attended church socials, participated in quilting circles. At first, every interaction felt dangerous, like someone might suddenly point and accuse. But as time passed and nothing happened, she began to relax incrementally. The news from the East gradually faded, replaced by other scandals and stories. By the time winter arrived, blanketing the prairie in snow, the murder of Charles Winters seemed to have been forgotten by everyone except Beatrice. Lucas was patient with her lingering fears, with the nightmares that still sometimes woke her gasping in the dark. He never made her feel weak for being afraid, never suggested she should be over it by now. Instead, he held her when she needed holding, gave her space when she needed space, and reminded her constantly through word and deed that she was safe with him. One night in early December, as they lay in bed listening to wind howl outside, Beatrice turned to face him. You ever regret it? Marrying me, knowing what you know? Lucas brushed hair back from her face, his touch infinitely tender. Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Beatrice Abbott. Even with all my damage, you are not damaged. You are strong and brave and beautiful. He kissed her softly. And I am honored that you trust me enough to let me love you. I never thought I could feel this way about anyone, she admitted. After Charles, I thought I was broken somehow, that I would never be able to let anyone close again. But you did let me close. You made me feel safe enough to try. She traced the line of his jaw with her fingers. You are so good to me, Lucas. Sometimes I worry I am taking advantage of your kindness. That is not possible. He caught her hand and kissed her palm. I give you my kindness freely, just as you give me your trust. That is not taking advantage. That is marriage. The holidays that year were both joyful and bittersweet. Beatrice missed her parents acutely, remembering Christmases past when they had been alive and she had been happy. But Lucas and Margaret worked to create new traditions, and Beatrice found herself caught up in the warmth of belonging to a family again. They hosted Christmas dinner at the ranch, with Margaret and Thomas and baby Thomas in attendance. Beatrice cooked for days, determined to create a feast despite the limitations of frontier life. When they all sat down to eat, Lucas said grace, and his prayer included thanks for bringing Beatrice into their lives. She had to blink back tears. As winter deepened, the ranch work slowed and Lucas spent more time inside with Beatrice. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their lives, their dreams for the future. He wanted to expand the ranch, maybe buy some sheep as well as cattle. She wanted to plant a real garden come spring, maybe get some chickens. Simple dreams, but precious. One afternoon in late January, as snow fell softly outside and they sat by the fire, Lucas asked the question she had been both hoping for and dreading. "Would you want children, Beatrice?" "Eventually, I mean." Her hand went instinctively to her flat stomach. "I do not know. Charles and I never conceived, and I was grateful. The thought of being tied to him that way, of bringing a child into that house." She shuddered. "But this is not that house," Lucas said gently. "And I am not him. I know that. Truly I do." She looked at him, this good man who had saved her in ways he might never fully understand. "The idea of having a child with you does not frighten me the way it once would have, but I worry about what kind of mother I would be after everything." "You would be a wonderful mother. I have seen how gentle you are with the animals, how patient. And the way you are with Margaret's baby, you are natural with him. That is different from having one's own." "True enough." Lucas pulled her closer, and she settled against his chest. "We have time to decide. There is no rush. I am just asking if it is something you might want someday." Beatrice thought about it, really let herself imagine it for the first time. A child with Lucas's green eyes and her dark hair. A baby born into love instead of violence. "Someday," she said quietly, "when I am more healed, when I am more certain of who I am now." Someday sounds perfect. Spring arrived gradually, the snow melting to reveal muddy earth that slowly greened. Beatrice threw herself into planting her garden, determined to coax life from the harsh Dakota soil. Lucas built her raised beds and helped her till the earth, and together they planted vegetables and herbs and more of the struggling flowers Margaret had originally chosen. Something about working with the earth, nurturing living things, felt healing. Beatrice would spend hours in her garden, hands deep in soil, coaxing seeds to sprout. Lucas would watch her from wherever he was working, and she would feel the weight of his gaze like a warm touch. One evening in May, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, they walked together through her garden. The plants were still small, but everything was growing. Beatrice felt an absurd pride in each tiny tomato plant, each sprouting bean. "You have done well with this," Lucas said, admiring her work. "It is beautiful. It feels good to create something instead of destroying." The words came out before she could stop them. Lucas turned to her, his expression serious. "You did not destroy anything, Beatrice. You saved yourself." "There is a difference. I still killed a man who was killing you." They had been over this ground before, but Lucas never tired of repeating it. "You have to stop carrying that guilt. It does not belong to you. I wish it were that simple. I know." He pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, resting her head on his chest. "But I will keep reminding you until you believe it, for however long that takes." She tilted her face up to his. "I love you. I do not think I say that enough. You show me every day." He kissed her softly. "But I never tire of hearing it." Summer brought long days and hard work. The cattle needed tending, the garden needed constant attention, and there were always repairs to be made on buildings and fences. Beatrice worked alongside Lucas as much as she could, learning the rhythms of ranch life. She was stronger than she had been when she arrived, no longer the thin, fearful woman who had stepped off the stagecoach. The work and the food and the peace had changed her, filling out her frame and bringing color to her cheeks. One afternoon in late July, they were working together to repair a section of fence when Lucas suddenly went still, staring toward the road. Beatrice followed his gaze and felt her blood turn to ice. A man on horseback was approaching the ranch, and something about his bearing spoke of authority. As he drew closer, she could see the glint of a badge on his chest. "Go in the house," Lucas said quietly. "Lucas. Go in the house, Beatrice. Now." She obeyed, but instead of hiding in her room as part of her wanted to do, she stood just inside the doorway where she could hear. Her heart was pounding so hard she felt dizzy. The man dismounted, and Lucas walked forward to greet him. "Can I help you, Sheriff?" So it was the sheriff. Beatrice's hands were shaking. "Lucas Abbott, I am Sheriff Morrison from Yankton. I am looking for information about a woman who might have come through this area last fall." "What kind of woman?" Lucas's voice was perfectly calm. "A woman from Boston, possibly traveling alone. Dark hair, slight build, might have been calling herself Beatrice or a similar name." The sheriff pulled out a piece of paper. "There was a murder back east, and this woman is wanted for questioning." Beatrice pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle a sound. This was it. After months of peace, her past had finally caught up with her. "I have not heard of anyone like that," Lucas said, and the lie was so smooth Beatrice almost believed it herself. "But we are pretty isolated out here. You might try asking in town." "I already did." "Your name came up because apparently you married a mail-order bride last summer who came from the East." "I did marry, yes, my wife Beatrice, but she is from Boston originally, not recently. She was widowed and came here looking for a new start." The conflation of truth and lies was masterful. Beatrice held her breath. "Is your wife available to speak with me?" "She is resting. The heat has not been agreeing with her lately." Another smooth lie. "But I assure you, Sheriff, my wife had nothing to do with any murder. She is a respectable woman who came here to escape bad memories, not to hide from the law." There was a long pause. Beatrice could imagine the sheriff studying Lucas, trying to decide if he was telling the truth. "I will need to speak with her anyway. It is just procedure." "Of course." "Let me get her." Lucas came to the door, and Beatrice met his eyes. He looked calm, confident, and something in his steady gaze gave her courage. "It will be all right," he murmured. "Just stay close to the truth." They walked out together, and Beatrice forced herself to meet the sheriff's assessing gaze without flinching. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps in his mid-30s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Abbott, I am Sheriff Morrison. I am looking for information about a woman named Beatrice Winters who disappeared from Boston last year. Do you know anything about that?" "Winters was my married name," Beatrice said, and she felt Lucas tense beside her. But it was the right move, she knew instinctively. Better to admit part of the truth than be caught in a complete lie. "I left Boston after my husband died." "Your husband died?" The sheriff's expression sharpened with interest. "Yes, he had a fall, hit his head. It was very sudden." The lies came easier than she had expected, probably because they were so close to the truth. "I could not stay in that house after it happened, could not stay in Boston at all, so I left. The reports I have say that your husband was murdered, that you killed him." Lucas moved closer to her, his presence solid and supporting. "My wife told me about her first husband's death. It was a terrible accident, and she has carried guilt about it even though she was not to blame. Is that what this is about? Someone trying to turn a tragic accident into something more sinister?" The sheriff looked between them, his expression unreadable. "His family believes it was murder. They say he would never have been so careless, that he must have been struck deliberately." "His family did not know what happened behind closed doors," Beatrice said, and for the first time, she let some of her old anger seep into her voice. "They did not know what kind of man he really was." "What kind of man was he, Mrs. Abbott?" Lucas's hand found hers, squeezing tight. "A violent one," Beatrice said quietly. "He hurt me, Sheriff. For 2 years he hurt me. That night he tried to kill me and I defended myself. So yes, I hit him. Yes, he died. But it was not murder, it was survival." The sheriff's expression shifted, something like understanding or perhaps pity crossing his face. He was silent for a long moment, studying Beatrice, and she forced herself not to look away. She had survived too much to cower now. "Can you prove any of this?" he asked finally. "The bruises are long healed," Lucas said, "but my wife still has nightmares, still flinches sometimes when anyone moves too quickly. If you know anything about how violence marks a person, Sheriff, you can see it in her eyes." Sheriff Morrison looked at Beatrice for another long moment, and she wondered what he saw. The frightened woman she had been, or the stronger one she was becoming. "I have seen enough battered women to recognize the signs," he said finally, heavily. "And I have seen enough of how the law treats them to know that self-defense is rarely believed when it is a wife defending herself from a husband." He folded up the paper he had been holding. "As far as I am concerned, Mrs. Abbott, I never found you. Beatrice Winters died somewhere between Boston and South Dakota. All I see here is Beatrice Abbott, wife of Lucas Abbott, living a quiet life on a ranch far from anywhere." Beatrice felt tears spring to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Do not thank me. Just live a good life. That is justice enough." He turned to Lucas. "You take care of her." "Always," Lucas said simply. They watched the sheriff ride away, standing close together until he disappeared from view. Then Beatrice's knees gave out and Lucas caught her, holding her up as reaction set in. "It is over," he murmured into her hair. "It is really over. He is not going to report finding you. He could change his mind. He will not. I saw it in his eyes. He understands." Lucas pulled back to look at her. "You are safe now, Beatrice, truly safe. No one is looking for you anymore." She wanted to believe it, desperately wanted to let go of the fear she had been carrying for so long. What if his family sends someone else? Then they will get the same story. But I think the sheriff was right that the trail is cold. You have been gone almost a year now. Eventually they will give up. He cupped her face in his hands. "And even if they do not, you have me. You have our life here. Nothing is going to take that away." The tears came then, great heaving sobs of relief and release. Lucas held her through all of it, his arms strong and steady around her. When she finally quieted, he picked her up and carried her inside, laying her on their bed and curling around her protectively. "I love you," she said when she could speak again. "I love you so much, Lucas. I do not know what I did to deserve you." "You survived," he said simply. "You were brave enough to run, brave enough to start over, brave enough to let me love you. That is more than enough." They lay there together as the sun set, holding each other, and Beatrice felt something inside her chest finally loosen. The fear that had been her constant companion for so long began to fade, replaced by something that felt like hope. The weeks that followed were different, lighter somehow. Beatrice had not realized how much energy it took to constantly look over her shoulder until she could finally stop. She threw herself into life with a new enthusiasm, embracing the community, making real friends, allowing herself to believe in a future. In early September, she realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she told herself it was stress or perhaps the hard work of summer. But when another month passed with no sign, she had to face the truth. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with a complex mix of emotions. Joy because this was Lucas's child made from love. Fear because what if she was not ready? What if she could not be a good mother after everything Charles had done to her? Anxiety because pregnancy and childbirth were dangerous, and women died from it all the time. She told Lucas one evening in late September after they had finished supper and were sitting on the porch watching the sun set. The words came out in a rush. "I am pregnant." Lucas went very still, his hand tightening on hers. "You are certain as I can be." "I have missed 2 courses and I have been feeling sick in the mornings." He turned to her and the expression on his face was one of wonder. "A baby, we are going to have a baby. You are happy." she had hoped he would be, but fear had made her uncertain. Happy. He laughed, a sound of pure joy, and pulled her into his arms. Beatrice, I am thrilled, terrified but thrilled. He pulled back to look at her. But what about you? How do you feel? I feel the same, thrilled and terrified. She placed her hand on her still flat stomach. I want this baby so much. I want to be a mother to your child, but I am afraid I will not know how. Then we will learn together. He covered her hand with his, both of them touching the place where their child grew. We will make mistakes, I am certain, but we will love this baby fiercely. That is what matters. Margaret was delighted when they told her, immediately launching into advice and stories about her own pregnancy and baby Thomas's infancy. Mrs. Walsh knitted tiny booties. The women at church threw a celebration, gifting Beatrice with handmade clothes and blankets. As her belly grew through the fall and into winter, Beatrice found herself feeling more content than she had ever imagined possible. Lucas doted on her, doing extra chores so she could rest, making sure she ate enough, worrying over every twinge. It was both endearing and occasionally annoying. I am pregnant, not an invalid, she told him one afternoon when he tried to prevent her from lifting a basket of laundry. I know, but humor me. He took the basket from her anyway. I want to take care of you. You do take care of me. You have taken care of me from the moment I arrived. He set the basket down and pulled her close as her belly would allow. You saved me too, you know. I was lonely out here, even if I did not fully realize it. You made this house a home. The baby arrived on a cold March morning in 1878, after a long night of labor that left Beatrice exhausted but triumphant. Margaret served as midwife, with Mrs. Walsh assisting, and Lucas paced outside the bedroom until they finally called him in to meet his son. The baby was small and red and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and his father's green eyes. Lucas took him with shaking hands, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he looked at his son. He is beautiful, Lucas whispered, pressing a kiss to the baby's forehead. He is perfect, Beatrice. They named him William, after Lucas's father, with the middle name Charles, which Beatrice insisted on despite Lucas's protests. I need to reclaim that name, she explained. I need to make it mean something good instead of something terrible. Baby William was a relatively easy infant, sleeping well and eating with enthusiasm. Beatrice took to motherhood with a fierceness that surprised her, that protective love burning away the last of her doubts. She had worried that Charles had broken something essential in her, but holding William proved her wrong. She could love deeply and well. Charles had not destroyed that. Lucas was a devoted father, rising with Beatrice for night feedings, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with William when he was fussy. Watching her strong cowboy husband cradle their tiny son with such gentleness made Beatrice fall even more deeply in love with him. As spring turned to summer and William grew from infant to baby, the Abbott family settled into new rhythms. The ranch continued to prosper, Lucas's hard work paying off in steady growth. Beatrice's garden flourished, providing vegetables for their table and extras to trade in town. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable and, more importantly, happy. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching William try to crawl across a blanket, Lucas said, "Do you ever think about Boston anymore?" Beatrice considered the question. "Sometimes. I think about my parents, wish they could have met you and William. But the rest of it, the bad parts, they feel like they happen to someone else now." In a way, they did. Lucas reached over to hold her hand. "You are not the same woman who fled Boston. You have become someone new here." "We both have. The lonely drifter who slept in the livery stable and the terrified woman who ran across the country are both gone now, replaced by us, a family," Beatrice smiled, watching her husband and son in the golden evening light. Yes, a family. William said his first word at 10 months, an unmistakable dada that made Lucas beam with pride. His first steps came 2 months later, and suddenly he was into everything, exploring his world with fearless enthusiasm. He was a happy child, quick to smile and laugh, and Beatrice often found herself overwhelmed with gratitude that she had been given the chance to raise him in love rather than fear. When William was 2, Margaret had another baby, a girl they named Sarah. The cousins were inseparable, and the two families spent even more time together, the children playing while the adults talked and worked. "You should have another," Margaret said one afternoon as they watched the children. "William needs a sibling closer to his age." Beatrice and Lucas had discussed it, but she had been hesitant. The pregnancy and birth had gone well, but she remembered the fear. Perhaps eventually, but eventually came sooner than expected. When William was 2.5, Beatrice found herself pregnant again. This time she was less anxious, more confident in her body's ability to bring life safely into the world. Their daughter was born in January of 1881, arriving quickly in the middle of a snowstorm that prevented Margaret from reaching them in time. Lucas delivered the baby himself, his hands steady despite his terror, and Beatrice fell even more in love with him watching him cut the cord and wrap their daughter in clean blankets. They named her Anne, after Beatrice's mother, and she was as different from William as possible. Where he had been an easy baby, Anne was colicky and fussy, keeping them up for months. But she also had a sweetness to her, and when she finally smiled, it lit up her whole face. William was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Lucas would let him hold Anne under careful supervision, and Beatrice would watch her son cradle his sister with a gentleness that made her throat tight. This was what family was supposed to be. This was what she had fought so hard to survive for. The years passed quickly, marked by milestones and memories. William started school in Sioux Falls, riding into town with Lucas each morning. Anne grew into a spirited little girl who loved the horses and followed her father everywhere. The ranch continued to grow, and Lucas was able to hire on 2 ranch hands to help with the work. Beatrice had become an integral part of the community, known for her kindness and her way with healing herbs from her garden. Women came to her for remedies and advice, and she found satisfaction in being able to help others. The frightened mail-order bride who had arrived in 1876 was gone, replaced by a confident woman who had found her place in the world. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas gave her a beautiful carved wooden box. Inside were all the letters they had exchanged before her arrival, carefully preserved. "I wanted you to have these," he said, "so you can remember how we started." Beatrice read through the letters, marveling at how young and tentative they had both sounded. 2 lonely people reaching out across the distance, hoping to find connection. "We were both so careful with our words," she observed. "We were strangers." Lucas pulled her close. "Now we are everything to each other. Do you ever regret it, that I brought so much danger and complication into your life?" "Never." He kissed her softly. "You brought love and laughter and family. The rest was just part of your story, and your story made you who you are." William was 10 when he asked about Beatrice's life before the ranch. They were working in the garden together, and he said, "Aunt Margaret mentioned that you came from Boston. What was it like there?" Beatrice paused in her weeding, considering how much to tell him. He was old enough now to understand some truths. "Very different from here. Everything was crowded and noisy. I was not happy there." "Is that why you came here, to be happy?" "Yes, I came here to start a new life." She looked at her son, this beautiful boy who would never know violence in his home. "And I found it with your father, This is where I belong." "I am glad you came," William said seriously. "Otherwise Anne and I would not exist." "That is true. You and Anne are the best things I ever did." Anne, at 8, was developing a stubborn streak that both exasperated and delighted her parents. She refused to wear dresses if she could help it, preferring to wear her brother's old trousers so she could ride and work more easily. Lucas indulged her, but Beatrice insisted she learn proper manners and how to run a household, even if she preferred ranch work. "She reminds me of you," Lucas said one evening, watching Anne practice her roping with fierce determination. "Me? I am not nearly so headstrong." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "You killed a man, fled across half the country, married a stranger, and built a life in the wilderness. If that is not headstrong, I do not know what is." Put that way, Beatrice had to laugh. "I suppose I see your point." By the time they reached their 15th anniversary in 1891, Beatrice could hardly remember the woman she had been. She was 38 years old, mother to 2 thriving children, wife to a man who loved her deeply, and part of a community that valued her. The nightmares had faded to occasional disturbances rather than constant terrors. The fear was gone. One night, lying in bed with Lucas, she said, "I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For saving me, for believing in me, for loving me even when you knew the truth about what I did." Lucas rolled over to face her, his green eyes still as striking as they had been the day they met. "You saved yourself, Beatrice. I just gave you a safe place to land. You gave me everything. A home, a family, a life worth living." She touched his face, tracing the lines that time and sun had etched there. "I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." "That is my line," Lucas said, smiling. "I was going to say something romantic." "Then say it." "I love you, Beatrice Abbott. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I thank God every day that you got on that stagecoach and came to Sioux Falls." They made love slowly, tenderly, 2 people who knew each other's bodies as well as their own. Afterwards, curled together in the darkness, Beatrice felt a completeness that would have seemed impossible 15 years ago. She had been so broken when she arrived here, so certain that she was beyond repair. But Lucas had proven her wrong. His patient love had given her the space to heal, to rediscover who she was beneath the damage Charles had inflicted. And in healing, she had become someone stronger than she had ever been before. The years continued to unfold peacefully. William grew into a fine young man who shared his father's love of ranching and his mother's gentle heart. He courted and married a local girl when he was 21, bringing her to live on the ranch in a new house. Lucas helped him build on the property. Anne proved just as headstrong as her mother had predicted, announcing at 16 that she wanted to be a teacher. She went to the small college in Yankton, one of the first women to do so, and returned to teach at the school in Sioux Falls. She married at 23, a young lawyer who appreciated her intelligence and spirit, and they settled in town. Lucas and Beatrice became grandparents multiple times over, their house frequently filled with the laughter of grandchildren. They grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. Lucas's hair turned gray, and Beatrice developed wrinkles around her eyes from years of squinting in the sun and smiling. But they still held hands on the porch in the evenings, still made each other laugh, still loved each other with the fierce devotion that had seen them through so much. On their 30th anniversary in 1906, their children and grandchildren threw them a celebration in town. The church hall was packed with friends and neighbors, and speeches were made about the contributions the Abbotts had made to the community over the past 3 decades. When it was Lucas's turn to speak, he pulled Beatrice to her feet beside him. "30 years ago," he said, his voice still strong despite his 60 years, A brave woman stepped off a stagecoach in this town and my life began. Everything good I have, everything I am proud of, started with Beatrice saying yes to a letter from a stranger. Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes as he continued. She made me a better man. She gave me children and grandchildren, love and laughter, and a purpose beyond just survival. And I want everyone here to know that I would do it all again in a heartbeat. The crowd applauded, and Beatrice stood on her toes to kiss her husband. Around them, their family cheered, and she looked at the faces of their children and grandchildren, at the life they had built together, and felt overwhelming gratitude. She had been so close to not having any of this. If Charles had succeeded in killing her that night, if she had not found the strength to fight back, if she had not been brave enough to run, none of this would exist. Her children would never have been born. Lucas would not have found the love he deserved. All of this joy and life would have been lost. That night, back at the ranch, they sat on their porch as they had done for 3 decades, watching the sun set over the prairie. The house they had built together had expanded over the years, but this porch remained the same, their favorite place. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if things had been different?" Beatrice asked. "If you had not placed that advertisement, or if I had not answered it?" "Sometimes," Lucas admitted. "But then I remember that we found each other because we were both looking. You were looking for safety and I was looking for love. We gave each other what we needed. You gave me so much more than safety. You gave me a life. And you gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to build something lasting." He reached for her hand, as he had done thousands of times over the years. "We saved each other, Beatrice." She leaned her head on his shoulder, comfortable and content. The girl who had fled Boston in terror was gone, replaced by this woman who had learned to be strong and happy. The young cowboy who had slept in livery stables was gone too, replaced by a respected rancher and devoted family man. They had both become the people they were meant to be, and they had done it together. As the stars came out one by one above the Dakota prairie, Beatrice thought about that terrifying night when she had confessed her darkest secret to Lucas. She had been so certain he would reject her, so afraid that the truth would destroy the fragile happiness she had found. But Lucas had held her closer and told her it changed nothing, and he had been right. Her past had not defined their future. Love had defined it. Trust had defined it. The choice they made every day to stand together had defined it. That was the real story, she realized. Not the violence that had driven her here, but the love that had transformed her once she arrived. Not the darkness of her secret, but the light of Lucas's acceptance. They sat together until the sky was fully dark and the prairie sounds of evening surrounded them. Then Lucas helped her to her feet and they went inside their home, together as they had been for 30 years and would be for whatever time remained. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.